Jeffrey Carter.
Hey.
How are you doing?
I am well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
You are on deck.
I am. It's your show.
It is our show. Here we are together. I was trying to put a number to it. We've known each other for probably between 22 and 25 years.
Yeah. So I started at Zimmerman at 97.
Okay.
So
97, and I think I started 96.
So there you go.
There you go. So however, 4 minus 2 plus 7.
Yeah, I'm not a numbers guy.
Let me divide that in a quotient of pi. Well, welcome. I'm really glad you're here. I'm looking forward to this conversation. It should be said for anybody watching or listening that you are a creative professional.
Yes.
So I know that we'll have a lot to discuss in the field of creativity, of music, of life in general. So let's begin this. It's hard to reach all the way across.
It is. We can try.
Yeah, we'll pretend, right?
Yeah.
This is when I look out on Greg. He's like, "Man, you need to either turn that table sideways or a shorter one." To which I would agree, but after spending so much time getting all the wires nice and neat, I'm like, I can't do it yet. I just can't. Everything's all tucked in.
Yeah, everything. Yeah, you don't want to mess with it now.
It's like, it's gonna,
done.
Let's get through the end of the year with this setup, and then maybe we'll make some changes going into 2022, which is not too far away.
Right around the corner,
right?
Especially the way the clock has been ticking lately.
Exactly.
It'll be here before you know it.
You've been in and around, the advertising creative business, and certainly have done your fair share in retail automotive. And as you know, I say it to everybody here, it's July. That means Christmas is seriously like right around the corner.
Sure. Everyone should be doing their Christmas creative right now.
It's Christmas in July.
Right? Don't you work like 6 months in advance? It's like fashion. You need to be working ahead of the clock. You should be showing your doing your winter fashion now.
Look at you. You're absolutely
so that
correct.
You're ready for the year ahead.
I don't know that we're that far ahead. I know that we run about 90 days ahead.
Right, yeah.
How about you guys?
Yeah, we run because we have seasonality, just like the automotive business does. So I would say 90 days. 90 days is about right. Yeah.
Now, you run a creative team of how many people?
Currently I run a creative team of about 10 people.
Okay.
It is obviously with the onset of COVID and et cetera like that, it was reduced. Mm-hmm. But right now, currently, it's about 10 people.
Which is still, it's a big job. It's a lot of coordination, and I know you guys do a lot of retail sort of stuff as well too. So it's seasonal.
Yeah, it is seasonal. Yeah, there is a seasonal aspect because we are the company does have locations in retail operations.
Right.
So we do try to match the retail calendar, which is heavily seasonal and holidays. Stuff like that. After
being a creative professional for your adult life, and certainly I know you've been involved in all aspects of it, from writing and design and producing and what have you, and I'm sure you'll fill me in on the areas where I'm not as dialed in. What is it about the creative space, that you still really enjoy the most?
I think what's fun about being in the creative space is it's kind of a sandbox. Right, it's a place where you can still play, where you're still allowed to play as an adult. Right, it's the closest you can get to having a job, and yet still being able to play, whether it be with video, whether it be with storytelling, whether it be with music, whatever it is, whatever story you're trying to tell. It still seems like a space where people can use that kind of youthful creativity, and yet still get paid. Right. I agree.
I agree. I think that it's so important to enjoy that, and I forget it sometimes. And I'm going through a process right now where I'm like I have some projects ahead of me that I actually really get to just create and come up with concepts and lead some of the creative efforts, and I'm looking forward to it. It's been a while since I've been able to really say, okay, even if it's just like a little ad or a little display thing, a script. I haven't done as much of that in the past years, just overseeing the operation of the business. And I'm looking forward to it as well, because you're right, it is. It's like play. You can forget it. you forget that it's like that, because
Yes.
sometimes it can just see kind of like you're cranking stuff out, right?
It can, and you often get reminded by people outside of creative, right, that you are in the cool space of the business. You forget it because, especially, you know, as a manager, or if you're in operations, it becomes very business-like. You're just trying to forward whatever the needs of the business are, and you forget that you're in that creative space. And you're often reminded by people outside, like, oh my God, I wish we could be there. I wish we could be doing that. Your guys' jobs are awesome. You know, you guys must have fun all the time. And you're like, oh yeah, I forgot. We do have fun.
Right?
Yeah.
A lot of our clients, you know, will joke with me. They're like, you know, when I retire, can I come down there and work for you?
Yeah,
right?
that too. They think you're goofing off.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Right.
But at the same time, I think they also think that, yeah, we are having fun, and a lot of times we are. You know, we just had that was a party, but we had a summer party here at the office yesterday. We barbecued and did karaoke. You know, we do that stuff occasionally just so that we do have fun.
Yeah.
And the work is fun. But yeah, it's still work. It's still a job, and there's still times that it's very stressful. But at the end of the day, when you get to primarily focus on creative and creativity and the message, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that piece of it is fun. Also, the piece of it I think that keeps people coming back to work every day, and what's intriguing about it is this element of trying to figure out the puzzle of whatever is going to drive whatever metric we're trying to achieve,
right?
Using whatever product, right? Like the product doesn't matter, but using whatever that product is, and then trying to figure out what it is that's going to move those needles can be a lot of fun too, right? There's a puzzle element to it, and if you're a tinkerer and you're a person who likes to really get in there and figure out, was this headline going to make a difference? You know, is this copy going to make a difference? You know, A/B testing, what's going on with this? It's, you know, figuring that piece of it, I think, keeps people coming back to that puzzle element of it, which in itself is kind of a game.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting, being that we both, and I don't know if Zimmerman was where you started in the business.
It is.
Okay, so then we, obviously, all right, then we
this
both.
This is my first real job.
Okay, and same here.
Yeah.
And what we were taught very much there was, you know, creative for awards is kind of pointless. You know, creative needs to drive a particular result, which sort of was at the time, if you think about it, sort of not where the industry was. It was, I mean, it's not to say that big time shops weren't doing creative to sell more product, but there was a lot of focus about creating something and hopefully getting an award for it and that recognition, where Jordan taught us, like, no, we need to drive sales.
Yes.
Right?
Right, which was, I think, an extremely valuable lesson to learn at the young age that I was.
Right.
In learning it, because I think it drove everything I did after that. Because even later on, you know, then it became, it needs to go viral. Remember that whole...
Sure, yeah. How? I don't know.
Like,
just do something interesting.
Make it viral.
Make it viral.
You know, it's like, you know, is it gonna move the numbers? That's what's important.
Right.
And then, later on in life, you do find out that award shows, most of them are pay to play.
Right.
So
what's the point? I think that in some ways, you know, Jordan's thought process in teaching was actually ahead of its time, because then we moved into the digital age where everything became about measurable channels to send a message down, right?
Right.
And while I would argue that I think our industry, and I guess you just have to say we were all learning, I think our industry spent so much time trying to figure out how to measure, and look at data and read data, that a lot of us lost sight of, well, what are we actually saying? We were looking at what was the result, what was the channel that we were saying something down, and then what were the results of that message, but not enough spending time really crafting a great creative idea that fit there.
Yeah.
But that whole thing that we learned, which was it's got to drive results, definitely applied as we moved into digital, because everything became measured, right?
Yeah, and then so, you know, a great creative is a combination between the art and the science.
Yeah.
And if you swing too much one way or the other, you've lost the thread. But the lessons that I learned as a young copywriter, I've carried throughout my career, and has always been my belief that unless what you are doing is helping someone at the end of that line who's actually sitting down with a consumer and trying to get that product across, unless you're helping them, you're not doing your job. You're just creating fluff.
Yeah, I've always said here that our job is to essentially make an introduction between a customer
That's right.
and somebody who is selling a product, right?
Yep.
And whether that introduction happens online, which it does
Yeah.
more times than not
Sure.
now, or if it happens in the store or at a retail location, at the end of the day, what we're doing is trying to make that like a matchmaker, right? You're trying
Yeah.
to bring two parties together,
Yeah.
and hopefully that results
Just
in
get
a
them face to face,
transaction.
get them to the door.
Yes.
Yeah, and then what happens from there is
Can't close the deals.
is on the person doing it. But yeah, a matchmaker. I like that. I like that analogy.
Yeah, it's a weird one, but I think it kind of fits. Jeff, at what point in your life, like what was, you know, when you were a kid,
Yeah.
what were the things that you were into that led you in this direction? What prompted you to choose a career in the field of advertising and marketing, and most specifically creativity?
That's interesting. So I think just like when they're investigating a crime, they look at what is it, means, opportunity, and motive.
Wow, that's above my pay grade. I don't know.
I think it's the same thing when it comes to when you're young. What you need in order to pursue a passion
Mm-hmm.
would be means, opportunity, but you also need someone to nurture you, right? So I think I was lucky, well, first of all, to have loving parents, but I had a mother who was an avid reader,
Mm-hmm.
just consumed novels, fiction primarily, like crazy. She was always, my mother's nose was always in a book.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, I think we became frequent visitors of the local library, which I was always in. And then, you know, I would come home with stacks. She had like a limit, like I could only take 10 books or something, you know, at the library.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd come home with 10 books, get through those, go back, get another 10 books. So at a very young age, I was reading a lot. And then I think there were a couple of things throughout my younger life that led me to it. So I was in first or second grade, and I had written love letters to every girl in class.
Oh, look at you, huh?
And the teacher called me out on it because she caught me passing the note to one and said, "Jeff, do you want to come up here and read it?" to the entire class. I think thinking that she was embarrassing me, but I was actually like, yeah, I'd love to read it.
No way.
Yeah, so I read it, and then she said, "You know what? You should become a writer." And
This is first grade?
like first or second grade. And I think I was doing it because I understood that there was power in writing something down and having someone be affected by it.
Right.
And then it's interesting when I think back on it, you're like, how did they even let this happen? I guess it was school in the 80s when teachers would give things like assignments like, you know, write down what the Constitution means to you or something like that. I was really into humor writers when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
So like Dave Barry,
Okay.
Mark Twain. I was reading like all of these, James Thurber, like all these humorists. So I would just take whatever the topic was and then go off on a crazy tangent, not even write about use the topic as a springboard to then write some crazy essay that had nothing to do with the topic, and I'd get an A. Right? So I would be rewarded for, you know, my flights of fancy on the page.
Right.
And then I wrote a play in 6th grade that we performed in the class. And then I think in 7th or 8th grade, I had an English teacher give me a book as a gift. I said James Thurber earlier, but it wasn't until later. She gave me James Thurber's My Life in Hard Times, which is a very brief autobiography
Mm-hmm.
by the humorist James Thurber. And her act of giving me that book, I think, just had such a profound impact on me, because it's like she recognized this kid loves reading. Let me give him something that I enjoy, and maybe, you know, it'll have some impact on him. And it did, because that book, it's the shortest autobiography I've ever read. It's about this big. You can read it in about an hour.
Perfect.
It was written in the 30s. It's about his it's a fictional retelling of some of the adventures he had when he was a kid growing up, I think in Columbus, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And there's all these kinds of crazy characters in it, all his family members. So there's an aunt who thinks that electricity is leaking in the house. He has like a grandfather who thinks the Civil War is still going on. There's all this cartoonish, and he's also an illustrator, so each one of them is a But anyway, I think and then I was a book nerd in junior high, so I would get the Cliff Notes for books that we weren't even assigned. You know how you would get the Cliff Notes?
Yeah. Even those I had a hard time making it through. So I really, I don't know how it happened, but I really got, and through junior high and high school, I really got into like Hemingway, Faulkner, Fitzgerald, all these like 20s and 30s authors. And I would get the Cliff Notes for books we weren't even reading in school. Right.
Just because they were a good way to kind of understand the thematics and the underpinnings of some of the of the stories that were going on. At that age, I didn't understand literary criticism and I wouldn't get that until later. This was an easy way for me to kind of understand how stories worked.
Mm-hmm.
And then I took a sidetrack into drama. I thought I was going to become an actor. So I went to New World School of the Arts for a year in the theater program, and then decided, this just isn't for me. I don't want to be this much in the.
Why is that? What was it about that experience that you were interested in, and what turned you off of it?
I think, I don't know, something turned in me that I didn't want to be in the spotlight as much as I had previously. And it's funny when you look back, the kids are fearless, right? They just throw themselves at whatever it is that they want without self-regard or, realizing how they look to the outside world. They just do it. And I don't know, something about it, something about the acting piece of it and being out there in front of everybody. Something in me just turned, and I wanted to be more introspective, and
it just didn't fit for you.
It just didn't fit.
Was there something about it that felt like disingenuous or phony?
I'm not sure.
Right.
I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't think I've examined it.
Mm-hmm. I'm asking because I remember when I was in college, I had a good friend. I still have this good friend, and he was such a talented actor. And I remember for his, when it was time to graduate, I guess in acting, I don't know if you'll call it a thesis, but it was a performance, right?
Yeah.
And we, maybe 50 people showed up to watch his graduation performance, and this was sort of like it's what you get graded on for all of your effort. I don't know what it's called. And I want to say it was a 20 to a 30 minute long just monologue. Not a monologue, but like a performance. And it was freaking riveting. It was so good, and he was so good. And he did it and blew everybody away, and and graduated, in a good position, and went on and was like, I'm never doing this again. Stopped. Didn't want to act anymore, didn't want to be in theater, didn't want to do anything. And I just remember I was like, I don't
what just happened?
What just happened? You've got such talent, you're so good at it, such a natural for this. And it was for him, it didn't feel like authentically him anymore. And I respect him for, a lot of people with that type of talent might have been like, I can kind of milk this,
Sure. Right.
And he was like, no, I'm not doing that.
I think you see a lot of actors today who are milking.
It's
or celebrities who are milking not a lot of talent and getting by on some.
It's probably always been that way to some degree. I would imagine that there's always been, the people who are either really beautiful or really handsome,
sure.
that they're like, let's kind of brush this person's skills up because we want to look at them. People are going to want to look at them.
Yeah, people want to look at them.
Right.
Whereas I think there are a handful of what I would call genuine thespians or actors who are really
insanely good.
Really insanely good.
What's his name?
Daniel Day-Lewis.
There you go. He's that's the one everybody goes to, right?
Right, like that guy is an actor.
Yeah.
With a capital A.
And I think he's done, is he not? I think he's.
Yeah, he said he's done.
Yeah. He's making shoes now.
Which you have to respect.
He's a cobbler.
Believing at the top of your game, which more people should probably do. Directors, especially.
Wasn't he like another one of these guys that like once he got into character, like he was in character?
Was method, yeah. He was what they call method acting.
Why do they call that method acting?
It's a method of, I forget the original person's name.
Right.
and I hope I'm not getting this wrong, but I think it was his method that he taught to,
which is basically
be the character.
Be the character at all times.
At all
Live
times.
it, sleep it, dream it.
Live it, sleep it, dream it. So there's a story I heard, Robert De Niro on the set of Goodfellas, and the kid who was on The Sopranos, I forget his name, but he's in Goodfellas, and went up to talk to him. Christopher on The Sopranos.
Oh, Christopher.
Yeah. Went to talk to
Michael Imperioli.
Michael Imperioli went to talk to Robert De Niro on the set of Goodfellas to say, "Oh, Mr. De Niro, always been a huge admirer. So pleased to meet you." And De Niro said, "Kid, get the fuck out of my face." In character. Right? Like, you shouldn't be talking to me. I shouldn't be talking to you.
Right.
Get out of my face.
Yeah. Fuck off.
And
This is a
wow.
performance happening right now.
So Michael was like, "Wow, that's method." Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if that story's true or not, but
Who knows? It makes for good.
Anyway.
Now, my dumb brain is thinking of like another method actor. That would be Sacha Baron Cohen in Borat.
Right, that's-
same deal. Like he would come out and he was Borat all
the time.
day, all the time.
yeah.
Still one of the funniest,
almost
most
like the
masterful
ultimate-
performances.
That's the ultimate method,
Yep.
right? Like you never break character.
Right? It's so funny. I still watch that movie. I'm like, oh my God. Like, I don't think anything he's done since then has even come close to it. Because that was just like a moment in time where he was able to get away with that. And it was
As
freaking-
Borat, the original.
Oh. Yes.
It's it's insanely funny, cringe-inducing.
Yes.
Yeah, you're almost like you physically like pull back
Right?
from the scenes that he's in. I mean, you can't. It's almost like you can't stand the tension of it.
Right? Because you can feel it. So you're like, oh my God, this is so incredibly awkward. And the fact that he was able to just like, go through it. Interesting. Well, I feel like I diverted us away, but we were talking about your acting career.
Yeah, my brief acting career.
Your brief stint.
Not a career.
Yeah, your brief stint on
In
stage
acting.
to which you said,
Yeah, I
fuck
said
this.
this isn't for me. Something about it
Right.
it just wasn't working for me. So I, much to the horror of my parents, I think, went back to public school.
Oh yeah.
which they acquiesced to. I don't think they were happy about it, but
And you grew up down here.
yeah, I was born and raised in Hialeah, Florida.
All right.
One of the
305.
rare. That's right, Mr. Worldwide.
Yeah.
So I went back to public school. Had some fantastic teachers, history teachers, English teachers in high school, and then pursued my my bachelor's in English literature. So at the end of college, I had miscalculated the amount of credits I needed to graduate. As I said it before.
I was going to say, Jeff, you were just very close to
I'm
being in
not a
danger of
numbers-
coming across as a really smart guy.
not a numbers guy. So I missed my graduation and had to do another semester, one class. So at the beginning of that semester, I was working in retail. I had been working at retail through college, just as, a college job. And I said, well, I guess it's time to launch my actual career. So I looked in the newspaper, as you did
At that time. Right.
And Zimmerman had a classified advertisement for a copywriter. Now, this is pre-Mad Men, so nobody knew what not in my circle,
Right.
knew what a
What's
copywriter
that?
was. But I'll never forget my dad saying, well, it's got writer in it, so it's got to be something
Right.
that you're good at. And I said, yeah, I didn't know what it was. So I said, yeah, I guess I'll go. And at that time, I don't know if they still do it this way, but call applicants at Zimmerman. It was a cattle call, essentially.
Right.
So there were like 50 people there when I show up. And you're in a gauntlet, essentially. And I did an interview with the managers at the time, and I got the job. And I was like, okay,
All
I
right.
guess this is what I'm doing now. And that's where I learned the trade. I had no experience in real advertising writing before then. Started off as a junior copywriter and have since then, for the last 20 plus years, been in writing, managing writers, editor, and or over designers, also creative managing or brand roles since then. So yeah, been working steadily since then. But it was quite an introduction.
Yeah,
It was the School of Hard Knocks.
Yeah, it was. For those that don't know, it was a very intense environment. It was a long hours, high stress, low pay type of environment,
Yeah.
which, we've talked about this before. What a proving ground, a learning ground, whatever you want to call it. It was everything that needs to be for somebody who really wants to learn their, cut their teeth and really develop their chops in this business.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. Yeah. Not everybody makes it. A lot of people bitch about it, but not me.
But I appreciate every moment I was there. Looking back on it, you don't always appreciate it when you're there. That's the thing about mentoring or nurturing. You don't appreciate it in the moment.
Right.
In the moment, sometimes you're like, I hate this. Why am I here? What's happening? And then years later you say, oh, thank God that happened to me, or that person took me under their wing. Even though they were tough on me, they made me into a better writer, professional, what have you. And what one of the key lessons you learned there was to leave your ego at the door. And I think for a writer in the ad business, it's a key lesson to these words on the page are not your babies.
Yeah, right.
If they're not getting the job done, they're not your babies. Get rid of them, move on to the
and
next
fast,
thing.
right?
Yeah, and fast, right. The pace.
Because I remember when you were a copywriter at Zimmerman and that department, it's like as account executives we constantly had to come back and like, no, change this, don't do that, change this, change that, and at a certain point in time it just you start getting irritated. Not irritated, but but you can, because I've been through this myself too, where you're just like, all right, what do they want to say? And you just like, right. You've done your job to be creative and craft what you think is a good script. And you go through 7, 10, 12 rounds of changes. And at the end of it, you're just like, tell me exactly what it is that they want. Let me just, is that it?
What does
Here
he
you go.
say?
Right? And at the end, it's like not yours at all in some cases. But that's what you're saying. You got to leave your ego at the door, because sometimes the client knows exactly what they want, or maybe they don't, but they think they do. And guess who's paying the bills? They are, right?
Yeah.
They're the one who's going to approve it at the end of the day.
Yeah, and you're trying to give them, they think they know what they want, and you're trying to give them what they need, right? So there is kind of a friction in there.
Yes, right.
But yes, at the end of the day, the client's always right.
And in there, the way it was set up there is you had, the account services team as a buffer zone between you guys and the client. So it wasn't even you're just dealing directly with the client. You're getting client opinion, you're getting account services opinion. You've got all this stuff. And I remember, you guys would be like, well, fucking sell the idea, right?
Right, like be behind the idea.
Yeah, come on, stand behind me on this, right? And it's like, they don't like it. Well, how'd you try? Not that hard, but I got 7 more of these to crank out in about an hour here. So can you fucking... work with me?
Which I think was right. You need to have that buffer. You can't have client directly tied it has the what do you call it, the needle right into creative. That's a disaster, I think, at any organization waiting to happen.
Well, it's funny that you say that, though. When I first bought the agency that became this, it was Trout Advertising, and there was like 8 of us, and all the artists, the graphic designers, they were like graphic designers and account executives. Like they dealt directly, they dealt directly with the client, which I was like, oh, this is so strange. But I was really thankful, because when I came in and took over, I not only had creative people who could do a good job, but they could freaking work with clients and get it done. And that was a huge help, because I was the only account person at the beginning, right? It's like it was me.
Yeah.
So I would be like, hey, you had a whole team of people, but that's very unusual.
That is.
And I do agree with you that in most cases. And they were just beat into submission to be able to do that, right?
Right.
But in most cases, creatives don't always interface well.
Yeah, because a lot of creatives are artists.
Yes.
And they are on the execution side of things, right? And looking towards the task at hand versus the big picture of how this fits into everything else that's going on, right? So in executing and maybe doing a fantastic job on one task, it can actually be off of the big picture and everything else that's going on. So that's why sometimes you need that buffer. But yeah, the school of hard knocks, I call Zimmerman. Tough clients makes tough account execs, makes tough creative. It's like all down the line.
Boom, boom, boom. We were so blessed. I will tell you that, there are still some of the toughest clients from there that I still have a relationship with to this day. Not that they're clients, some have been and some haven't been, but you know, those bonds were forged in the fire, and many of them have lasted for now, you know, almost. This summer for me is 24 years. I know Brad and I have talked about this is 25 years for him since he started there. I started 24 years ago, right about now.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, that's a long, it's kind of crazy,
time.
Right?
Yeah, when you start thinking about it, you're like, it's like, man,
wow,
come on.
How did that?
That's not real.
Right? How did that happen? How did almost 25 years go by?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I saw you had Les Eck.
Yes.
On.
Yes.
And man, I just had a flashback to working on all of those Rusty
Eck, right?
Jobs back in the day. I mean, countless. I can't even tell you how many we did.
Yeah, he's a client.
That's crazy.
We've had Gary Barbera as a client. He'll probably watch this. I think he watches most of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Prowler, wasn't it the Prowler?
Yes.
The bear and the
Prowler. He had the Prowler and the bear.
It's things I'll never forget.
Oh my God, it's such funny, such
we worked
funny
on
stories.
Those things around the clock.
He was the toughest client. Yeah. In my opinion, in my experience, and he was the toughest client. He was the most demanding. There was the most volume of work for him. It was insane, the amount of stuff that you needed to crank out. But I'll tell you, at the time, oh man, I hated it in some ways. You know, I was like, oh my God, this guy's all over me.
In it. Yeah.
But it was one of the best things I could have ever experienced. You know, and now we'll see each other. You know, he'll chime in on Facebook or send me a text. He never misses the anniversary. No, he never misses my dad's birthday. Even though my dad has passed, he never misses it. Always sends me a text.
Right.
You know, that kind of stuff. So it's like you went through this, you know, really challenging experience as a young professional with a client, and here you are almost 25 years later, and the guy still remembers like the smallest of details. And I just think, you know, I was going to ask you, because I'm kind of bouncing around in my mind, you know, what is it that you're looking for in young people that are coming to you, and do you think, you know, I don't mean to sound like the old guy looking at the younger generation, could they hack that type of experience?
Wow, that's a great question, because it seems like it's from a different age.
It's like
it's like when I was talking about my school experience earlier. It's like, how did that even happen? How did they even let me take an assignment that was supposed to be about something, but I completely ignored it and wrote about something else, and they were like, great job. Great job.
Right?
Right? Would that happen today because they're so focused on testing?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I think some of the creativity aspects.
Right, like you wouldn't have checked the boxes in that.
Right, yeah. So it seems like it's coming at you from a different time. But yeah, I think the younger people of today could hack it. I mean, I don't know how much the culture of Zimmerman has changed. So
don't know.
There have to be younger people working there today.
Right. Yeah.
Right? It's not full of a bunch of geezers. So yeah, I think the younger people of today can hack it. When I'm hiring, sometimes I'm not even that interested in specific skills. I just want to know if they're smart. Because smart people will figure things out.
Right.
You know, and can figure different things out, different challenges you give them. So sometimes it's not even about, oh, you're the best whatever in the world. Are you a smart person? Can you figure things out?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's really what I look for, is intelligence.
When you're sitting across from somebody, what are the indicators for you that would lead you to believe, okay, this person's got a good brain on good brain in their head?
That's a good question. I don't know if I have an answer for that.
I would answer it, you know, in a number of ways.
Yeah.
First and foremost, like, are they engaged with you in the conversation? Meaning, is their posture good? Are they looking you in the eyes? Are they you know, first and foremost connected with you, right?
Yeah, in the moment.
Right. And if you have that, then you can I feel like you can gauge their thought process, right?
Right, because I have had interviewees who seem distracted.
Right.
Right, who are totally not, they're totally not in the space that we're in. Their heads are obviously somewhere else.
Right.
or they're focused on they're not focused on the conversation that's happening now. They're focused on some other thing that happened a long time ago.
Right, or just providing sort of token answers, right?
Token answers, and they're not part of the conversation we're actually having.
Yeah,
I've had those interviewees, and those are, you almost instantly. It's funny how quickly you can gauge whether or not, because you're not just interviewing them for the skills that they have, you're interviewing them for their fit for the organization,
yes.
right? Because a creative team is like any other team, a menagerie of different personalities and work styles and moods, and there's kinds of it's and in a way it's like the bench of a team, right? You're trying to fill in those gaps where you might be missing strengths and where that your team is weak, so you're trying to fill that out. So you're trying to feel out a lot of different stuff. And it's funny, you can almost know right away whether someone's going to fit or
if they're
not.
Going to be
it's almost
fit.
Instantaneous.
I know. It's so important, and I have made mistakes in hiring.
Me too.
That just, you get somebody on board and you think, okay,
yep,
they've got the knowledge, they've got the skill, they got the ability, but they just turn out to be a terrible fit, and it's almost like it just makes you cringe all day. You're just like, ugh.
And I found in those,
God.
It's almost always happened when there is a crunch to fill a position.
Yes.
Like, this position needs to get filled. We just need a body.
Need somebody.
We just need a breathing person in this job. That's usually when the hiring mistake happens.
Yep.
I've made them, and I've admitted them when I've made them. It's a terrible feeling when you make them, because you've let them down, right? Because it's your role to shepherd folks into roles and nurture them and right, and mentor them and make sure that they have a home in the organization. You've let them down. You've let the team down, because the team knows it. Right? You know it, but the team's usually the first one to come along
the first
and
ones and be like,
can we talk?
What's up with this person?
Can we talk? Can we have a quick chat? They set up a chat.
Right.
Can we have a one-on-one where you usually don't have one-on-ones with them?
You're like,
so something's wrong.
Right.
They're the first ones to come out and be like, oh, something's not right here. But you've let yourself down because you know that you made a mistake.
Yeah. And
but you got to own up to it.
Nobody bats 1,000.
Yeah,
exactly. You got to be like, yeah.
And then when that happens, I just think, but man, I've made some great hires. I've made some great hires. So there's that.
Redeem yourself a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. I've hired some people who have, gone on to great things. Mm-hmm. So you're like, wow, like maybe that was all me.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Don't break your arm patting yourself on the back.
That was all me.
Yeah, it was all me.
If not from me, that stepping stone.
Do you? I know I asked you, if you still enjoy it and what you still, but do you still? Are you still a reader? Do you still like to write? Is the written word still something that captivates you?
Yeah, I am still a reader. I just finished a great novel. I'm a fiction reader. I dabble in nonfiction occasionally, and there are many nonfiction works that I've enjoyed, but it's not my primary genre. If I'm going to sit down and read something, it's usually fiction. So I just finished a great novel called Hamnet. Hamnet is a fictional telling of the story of Shakespeare's son, who was actually named Hamnet.
Oh, really?
And he died during the era of the Black Plague at a young age, and then a few years later, Shakespeare wrote Hamlet. So it takes place in a very brief period of Hamnet's life, and it was just a wonderfully written. Every word on the page was just like singing to you. So yeah, I am still a reader. I still get that vibe from well-written material, that gives you like that little, this is good stuff. And then I am an active writer in the organization. I'm an editor, so I oversee not just writing, but I oversee all of the creative that happens. But I do participate also in writing a lot of pieces, and yeah, in those moments, I really enjoy it when you get in there and you start whittling away at those words and make them work for you. Right. And it's always, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen when you write it. It happens in the editing. That's where the magic happens. Not all of us are Paul McCartney, right? And can write a song on the toilet.
Right.
Right.
But there's something enjoyable about the editing process of your own idea,
go back,
like honing it. And you
go back and you go, oh, well, I thought that was good, but that kind of sucks. But this, doing this to it,
and it's usually like you're removing. I find it's removing stuff. It's like you start off with a block of wood, and you get the basic shape, and then you're just like chiseling away just little bits until you get something that is as lean and tight and says exactly what it needs to say.
Yeah.
Without one extra word.
It's funny you say that because there's that, I forget who originally said it, but they said you write everything 3 times. You write it first to get it down on the paper, the second to edit it and get it more in the shape, and then the third time is to get it to say exactly what it needs to say. So you almost said the quote exactly.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. It's like a movie in that way, right? A movie is essentially made 3 times. It's made when the writer writes the script, when they shoot it, and then in the editing room is where the real movie is made.
Yeah.
So it's all in the editing.
I've just recently watched, since my wife and children went away to Russia, I've watched all the Star Wars movies.
Okay.
Again. 9 plus the other 2.
Yeah.
11 total movies.
It's
good, bad.
It's an investment.
Mixed bag. Yeah,
the good, bad, and the ugly.
Right.
Yeah.
But there was something in one of the behind the scenes that said that, the final Star Wars movie, the one that we, saw in the theater, they were like down, literally almost like to the last second, changing, re-editing. I mean, like literally tweaking it up until the very last second. Right. No different than like when you have a presentation at the agency. It's like, people like to think, get it started nice and early. You'll have it done a couple days before. You have some time to think about it, make a couple final adjustments with no stress or pressure. No. This is something. There's this thing that just like sometimes drives you right up into the last second where you're tweaking, adjusting until you get it like as good as you possibly can.
Yeah. I mean, I think that having a deadline is an important aspect of creativity.
Thank God. Thank God for deadlines, right? Nothing would get done.
I think creatives are born procrastinators. You have to have a deadline. That is a driver of action.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's right up to the last minute. That's right. But the magic is in the editing. It's in the whittling. And like you said, I think of it that way too. The less, the better. Get to the core of what the idea is. That's where the magic is. And I still enjoy that process a lot.
I find, as I'm listening to you talk about all the books that you read, I'm sitting here, I'm like, oh my God, such a dummy. Like I really don't, I don't read a lot of books. Like it's one of those things where I'm like, I should read books.
I have a lot of books I start, but I don't finish.
Now I'm leading to a question here. Yeah. This is not just beat myself up for not reading enough books, but more importantly, I've found lately that, and I think it's as a result of fucking social media, that when I sit down to read a book, I find that my attention span is even more limited and easily distracted than ever before. Now, maybe I'm just not picking up the right book, but I feel like I've started 24 books in the last 2 years, and I haven't finished a single one of them.
Yeah, I have that pile too, the pile of shame, the books. What about, even worse than that, what about the books that you've bought but haven't even started?
Even opened?
Right, haven't even opened.
I open them all. I'm always like, oh, here we go.
They're just there. Yeah.
This one's going to be good for me.
No, they taunt you from the bookshelf. Just like,
okay, so this is a common phenomenon?
Yeah, I
shouldn't feel so terrible.
There's so much vying for our attention now. You got to remember where books came from, right? They were the entertainment of their age, and we're now in a time where there's so many other things vying for your attention. But you're right. To a point you made earlier, social media, I think, has fractured our attention span to our detriment. I truly believe that, to our detriment, because it's almost like gambling, where you're spinning that wheel. Sorry, I keep hitting this. Yeah. You're spinning that wheel trying to hit that dopamine, right? What is that post? What's the post that's going to get you to like it or to share it?
Right.
Or, what's the thing?
Or just like to genuinely entertain you within
just entertain you.
30 seconds,
and then you're on to the next thing, right? And it's like,
beep,
beep, beep, beep, beep. Whereas a book, you really need to surrender yourself to the author and to the world that they're trying to create. And yeah, it is kind of like slipping into a mode that I think our modern minds just have gotten away from.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not alone. You're not alone, Chris.
Thank you, Jeff.
Do we need a? Is there like a
support
group? Yeah, is there a group like book non-finishers?
I don't know, but as you're saying this, I have this vision in my head, right? And the vision, I mean, clearly, and we'll talk about it in a minute.
Yeah.
I'm creating my sort of my own version of this here for now, and I've always wanted to have a house somewhere in the country where there's land and space and what have you, and a lot of nature.
Yeah.
And that detached from the house is a barn. Not like a red barn that you go inside and it's filled with horses.
What about
but
a more modern?
Like a more modern,
like
long
gray and black
barn, right?
Slate flooring.
In the barn.
More modern.
Yeah.
Yeah, not a red.
No, not a red barn. Well, maybe more natural neutral colors. Okay, we're going to go natural neutral. A lot of wood, but light.
What kind of wood?
I don't know. I don't know my woods. I'm not a fucking woodworker. But in the barn is like my creative studio, right? It's like all the music, like there's a music setup, drums, like a musical performance area. Maybe there's another area where you can paint and all this stuff. And don't get me wrong, I love technology. I love that I have access to all this information. Yeah. The social media, it's just TV. I mean, that's all it is super fast TV for me, right?
Right.
But I love the aspect of being able to learn whatever I can via the internet.
Amazing.
But like the thought of having this house like off on the hill, this barn where it's like creative space, work is getting done. I'm not like slacking. But the only way to contact the home is a fucking telephone, right? And there's an answering machine. A landline with an answering machine, Mm-hmm. And if the phone rings, either I hear it or I don't hear it, leave a message.
Yeah.
And I'll call you back.
Yeah.
Not this constant like, oh, I got a text. Oh, I got a WhatsApp. Oh, I got this. Like this constant messaging that comes in. Sometimes it's like.
Yeah. I mean, it's telling that what you're saying, you need to physically like detach yourself.
Yes.
It's telling. I mean, that's the hold that this technology has over us, right? That you need to like consciously make that effort to put the device or whatever it is, the iPad, the iPhone, what have you, your Android device. I don't want to be platform bias, but you have to put it to the side and really disconnect yourself and say, I am not going to look at this thing. I'm going to do something else for a little while.
I'm curious for you, does the speed of which information comes in, the speed of which information is accessible, the speed of which you are able to access, enjoy creativity, all that stuff, do you find, like I said, it's hard, I find it harder to read a book now. Do you find that pace of information also affects how you're able to make space in your mind to actually create, or are you able to kind of...
You do need to, the same thing, you do need to kind of create that space for yourself to limit the distractions, right? They have devices now that are, remember the old word processors?
Yeah.
Yeah, they have those today to say, listen, this is where you write, and the computer is where all the other stuff happens. Because if you're on the computer, you're on the internet, is the assumption.
Oh, really? So literally almost like a separate machine, computer device?
Yeah, it's almost like you need to do this. Or,
like a digital typewriter.
Yeah, or there are also programs that will like black out everything except for the thing that you're working on, so that you don't even have the tabs at the bottom to distract you, like, oh, I could check my email. I could do this. I could do that. I don't use those. I find the ability to just pull up the screen.
You've got the power.
I got the power. But yeah, these things are available because the draw is so strong to do something else. I mean, I think it's in human nature. Whenever you need to sit down and do something, your real inclination is to do something else. Right? Right? Like, I don't want to do this thing. I don't want to do the thing I have to do. I want to do the thing I want to do. That's human nature. But, I find it okay to like, but, I do find myself jumping. You jump off, you read something, you get back into it. But yeah, writing does take focus. You need to sit down, get into it. But the good thing about writing is once you've written it, you can walk away and do something else. And usually that's where some actual writing happens. It doesn't happen there in the moment on the page. What you've actually written down, you walk away. You go ride your bike, you walk your dog, you take a shower, and in there you start thinking back on what you've written, and then you do some modifications, some editing in your head, and you're like, no, this is it. And then you go back to it and fix it and make it what it needs to say. That's the good thing about writing. You can walk away. It doesn't always have to be like right then in the moment where all
you
those
can
distractions.
continue to.
You keep writing even though you're not actually writing. You know, which is why some people are like, "Are you listening to me?"
Huh?
What?
What? Yeah.
Why are you staring off into space like that?
I find that I have no shortage of ideas right now. Like, you know, like they're coming and I'm writing them down. But I think due to the pace of life in the last few years and, you know, starting and having a family and running a business and I realized that I'm like, wow, I have a lot of stuff stacked up, good thoughts, good ideas, things that just need to be done, whatever it is. And I'm like, wow, I've got a lot of unfinished work, right? And some of it could just be like menial projects. Other things are highly important. And I've been saying this like the last few weeks, I've just been working like a maniac to try and like tame down as many of those things that can be resolved quickly or ideas that I can get into, you know, get moving forward more quickly.
Yep.
Just to get to the point where I'm like, okay, now I've cleared my plate to think about the big ideas and actually start executing the big ideas. And I haven't been in this place where I can actually sit down quietly and with a sense of eagerness begin being creative again from writing and designing. Because
all the little things can stop the big thing from happening.
It's just like,
that's life. That's why oftentimes when, I don't know if this happens to you, but when I go on vacation sometimes and disconnect from the routine of work and this, that, and the other, your brain can start going to other places where you start thinking about some bigger ideas that you'd like to accomplish versus all the little things that need to happen every day. So it's like almost like all those little things are the enemy of the big ideas.
Hence my idea to have like a barn with no connectivity. Like even this idea, this thing that you're talking about, like a word processor, there's a separate machine. It's sort of like a modern day version of like, you know, I'm going to sit down with a typewriter in a perfect window nook, and I'm, you know, I've got all
my writer's studio where nobody can contact me, and But once you get in there, right, are you going to be like, I want to go do something else?
Or you're just going to sit around like make a paper airplane.
Right. But I think many successful writers follow that regimen where they will get in a room for 8 hours, however long, and sit there and, you know, not leave. And it doesn't matter if they write or not. The whole point is to be in that room and just think about the thing you need to do versus everything else that you want to do.
But what is it? What is it about? What makes it so hard to start sometimes, right? Like you know what you want to do. You know, let's say you have a concept, an idea, like a creative idea. It's something that you know you're going to flesh out via writing.
Yeah.
Why like I struggle with this. You know, I know exactly what I need to do, know what I want to do. I'm excited about it, but like it's like,
where do I even start?
Right.
And then not only that, but it's hard to finish. So you'll start something, you'll get it like a little bit, and then you'll be like, let me move on.
I made a little progress.
Let me move on. You know, like those little, we haven't talked about musically yet, but I sent you like little bits of songs.
Yes.
I have like little pieces.
Right.
But like, it's tough to get to the point where you actually like write out the whole thing. Yeah, it is tough to start.
That's why I like the advertising and marketing field. I like the deadline. I need the deadline. That's
right. That's what I said before. The deadline is a critical element of getting it done.
Right.
It's a critical element of creativity. If you don't have a deadline, it's not going to get done.
Right. You know, that's the way that I feel about it. You even wonder if the greatest musicians or, you know, if you go back, you know, hundreds of years into, you know, medieval times or Baroque times or whatever, the painters, the musicians.
That's right. They were on commission.
Right. They were on commission by royalty to do a job,
like,
you
get
know.
this done or we'll chop off your head.
Right. Exactly. So even then, it's not like Mozart was just sitting around, you know, just lollygagging and stuff. There was plenty of times when he was like, if I don't do this, I'm not going to eat, right? Because he was a notorious mismanager of his money and what have you.
Yeah.
And for me, and as you're saying, it's that pressure of the deadline that somehow it electrifies me when there's no other, you have no choice. It's like, okay, now it's fucking go time.
Yeah. Well, I think that's across all. I mean, musicians go into studios and book studio time. They don't have unlimited funds.
Right.
You've got the next 30 days to get this thing done. Films have a budget, right? Like, let's go. Let's get this thing shot. You plan it. You shoot it. This is it.
That's what you got.
That's your shot. So I think the deadline. So what do we have? Means, motive, opportunity, nurturing, and deadline. I think the deadline is what separates your, just you like messing around versus something that actually gets executed on and is actionable.
Yeah, I wish it wasn't that way because, sometimes it just drives me crazy because I'll literally, and I'm an early morning person more than a late night person. So, this has resulted in countless mornings of me waking up at 2 a.m, 3 a.m, literally last second putting stuff together just to get it done. And it is exhausting, and it's exhausting for everybody around who's a participant, right? Who is kind of waiting for you to give the direction on when to get done, because now you're putting all that pressure on them. But it's just one of those things that just like, I don't know what it is. It's just that last minute deadline push is what kicks me into gear, and all of a sudden I go. And I've never not delivered.
Right.
I've never missed a deadline. I can't think of a single time where I was like, we didn't make the deadline, right? There's always a way. It always gets done.
Happens.
It always
it's
gets done.
It's like magic. But for personal things that you're trying to get done, where there is no deadline, I think that's an intriguing avenue to pursue. Why don't those things happen? Is there too much else to do?
I don't know.
Is there an element of this is no good? We self-censor a lot, I think, as artists and creative people, where it can't even get past your right. Like, you can't even let it, because you're like, this sucks, or like, this isn't good enough, or like, nobody's gonna like this.
Right.
It can't even get past your filter to get out there. And I think that I think some artists embrace their idiosyncrasies and their unique voice
and just let it fly.
They don't say, oh, this isn't good enough. They say, this is the best thing that ever happened. Right? And like, that is what gets it past that. There seems to be like a critical point of nothing makes it past this. Like, everything mediocre and not. But then the things that make it through, some of it's just somebody saying, I think this is the best thing.
All right. So I was having a hard time attaching to that thought process until now, because I remember my dad used to give me shit. He'd be like, Chris, you're like, ready, aim, and then some people are just ready, fire, aim, boom. Right, boom, right, and so a year and a half ago when I came up with it, I was like, I want to do a podcast, and met with Greg, and we started piecing all this together. I just said, okay, dude, just do it. Like, if you're gonna fuck it up, things are gonna go wrong. Like, it's not gonna be perfect. Maybe people like it, maybe they don't. It's gonna, but like, I'm now at the point right now where unless it totally sucks, it's going out, right? Because I'd rather do that than deliberate about something for weeks on end and then not do it.
I think there's a lot to be said
so sometimes
for
you just gotta
actually getting it out there versus endlessly deliberating it and never putting it out.
Well, we also live in an environment and a time now where there's so much freaking content that it's not like, if you throw a turd out there, right? It's not like a year later you're going to be hearing about, but that, that episode or that, that ad, because there's so much stuff. It's
that
just
one
like
with Jeff Carter. That was the worst.
That was terrible. What were you guys doing in there?
As I said, it's your show. I don't know why you'd have me on, but
for exactly this, because we can talk about this kind of shit, like that.
Yeah,
That's why.
No, the fact that you actually did it is a huge step. I mean, we're here. You're doing it.
Here.
Right? It's a huge step, because a lot of people don't even make it this far. They get to I could do a podcast. First of all, a lot of people stop right there. I could do a podcast. All right, what else can I do? Or they get to, I could do a podcast. Let me start researching the equipment I need.
Right.
And then they stop there because they're like, oh, it's too exciting. I don't understand this. I could do a podcast. Let me do the podcast. They do one and they quit.
Yeah.
Right.
One of our
It's
previous
like-
guests, John, said that I think the most make it, the average is like 4 or 5 episodes.
Right. Because they run out of steam for whatever reason.
Right.
Right. They run out of content. They run out of things to say. They don't think it's good enough. I forget who the author was who was talking about the writing process. Somebody asked them, why don't most authors make it? And not make it from a mainstream financial standpoint to like be rich and famous, but why don't they even make it to the point where they're publishing? And he said it's because they get to the part where they write something and then they look at it and say, you know what, this isn't very good, or I don't think anybody's going to like this. I can't. They don't make it past that point,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't actually get it out there. He said the most important thing when you do, if you want to make it as a writer, is to publish it. Just publish it. Doesn't matter. You think it sucks?
Okay.
Just publish it. Just get it out. Just get it out, and keep doing that. And keep doing that. You got to get past that part. You get past that part, and then you're in the running to make something actually happen. But if you don't do that, you're never going to make it.
Right, and you're just going to hold yourself back, and you're going to be a person with tons of ideas that you never executed or you didn't think they were good enough, and then what do you become? You become the bitter guy that's like, well, I could have
done that.
No, fuck that.
Yeah.
I'd rather fail, because when you fail, you learn, hopefully.
That's the only way to learn.
Yeah, that's it. It's like you win or learn. That's it.
Yeah.
So you might as well get busy living or get busy dying. Listen, I love that. I think that's a fucking great quote, but it's true. So here, so this is episode 28, right?
I mean,
we got, this is 28
that's
and
a lot.
We're on track for our, one per week or 52.
Scraping the bottom of the barrel.
Stop. Your self-deprecating sense of
I'm doing
humor,
it to myself.
Jeffrey. You're self-sabotaging.
Cheers to 28.
Yeah, cheers to 28.
Cheers to 28. You're getting it done, man.
Yeah.
I admire it.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I'm glad you're here. Let's pivot, shall we? Okay, let's pivot to our other form of connective tissue,
Yes.
and that is music.
Ugh.
Where bleh. Where did it start for you? Like, what I know you played piano, but
that's not
what
the
was it?
formation
Yeah,
of
what was it?
my love for music.
Right.
When I think back, so I had a mom who was really into reading,
Mhm.
and a dad who was really into music.
Okay.
So my dad loves doo-wop, 50s doo-wop.
Okay.
Can name every member of every doo-wop band there ever was, knows every song. It was constantly playing at home. But he also had a very eclectic vinyl collection. Everything from like classical music to Chicago Transit Authority, Vanilla Fudge, Beatles, Simon and Garfunkel. I mean, just like this accumulation, but also like Engelbert Humperdinck, like just anything you could think of.
Right.
He had. And then I also grew up in that time, we were talking late 70s, early 80s with AM radio and all that stuff. You could just put on the headphones and just, zone out to that stuff. So I think that music constantly playing in the house at an early age turned me on to a love of music and how it could elevate the everyday. That's what I like about music.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like you can make yourself in a movie all the time with this kind of soundtrack.
Yeah.
It elevates every moment of whatever you're doing. Sometimes it's just background noise, which can be nice, but it can also heighten whatever's going on around you. So I really think that having music constantly playing in the house of all different varieties, being exposed to so much different music, helped me in my love of music. I don't know how I became interested in the piano. I don't remember why, but I did take piano lessons.
Mm-hmm.
I think for 7 or 8 years. And then, well, of course, it was the 80s. So we were into skateboarding.
Yeah. Okay.
That was the big thing then. We were
Yep.
reading Thrasher magazine.
Hell yeah.
And watching, was it Gleaming the Cube? Was that an 80s movie?
I've never heard of that one. Was
It
it a
was-
skating movie?
Yeah, like skating movies.
Oh, I'm thinking, what were the Powell and Peralta movies like, Escape of
Oh,
Dr.
yeah,
Chin
yeah,
or
yeah.
whatever like that?
Yeah, so we were into all that. Of course, there wasn't YouTube or anything like
Right,
that, so
right,
we
right.
got Thrasher magazine and
Yep.
we poured through it all the time. And yeah, videos like bootleg VHS tapes
Yes.
of guys doing stuff in California. So it went all the way from California to Hialeah, Florida, where a group of neighborhood kids were tearing it up in the strip malls. And of course, along with skating comes music.
Yeah.
They go hand in hand.
100%.
So, we were getting into the bands at the time, Black Flag, Suicidal Tendencies, who did Wild in the Streets? The Circle Jerks.
Yes.
Right? These are not family-friendly band names, but that was the music that accompanied skating at the time.
Yeah.
It was punk music.
Yep.
So I remember I was into all that stuff. I think Suicidal Tendencies Join the Army is the first cassette I bought with my own money that I had gotten mowing the lawns. That was my side job when I was however old, 11, 12 years old.
Right.
I would mow lawns in the neighborhood. And I had money from it. I would charge $5, I think $10 to mow a lawn. So I'd saved up enough money, and I went to Specs, was the music store at the mall.
Okay.
And I bought Join the Army on cassette. That was the first one. I listened to it nonstop. And then a friend of mine came over. I'll never forget. He had a white cassette with no lettering on it. It was just a white cassette. And he said, I want you to listen to this. So it was 1986. I said, okay. So he puts it in my boom box. And he says, this is really chill music. And the beginning of Metallica's Battery starts playing. Which, if anybody knows Metallica's Battery, it's an acoustic intro.
Yes.
So I said, oh, this is kind of cool. And then it kicks in. And it was so majestic.
Yeah.
Stately and majestic and powerful. I was in awe of it. And I think that's where my love of heavy metal and like hard rock came into play, because I was just like, wow, this is amazing. And became a huge, of course, Metallica fan. And then from there I got into thrash, so all the Bay Area bands, Exodus, Megadeth, New York, Anthrax.
Right.
And when you're a kid, you tend to get into a niche and stay there.
Yeah.
So I stayed there for a while. And then as I got older, in fact, I'm still discovering new sounds that I like. But I think that was really the beginning of it. And of course, then I wanted to play guitar, because piano's not cool, right? Like, you can't be James Hetfield playing the piano. Who ever heard of that?
Yeah,
that's
right.
not cool.
That's not a fit.
That's not a fit. So I wanted to play guitar. So we formed a little band in junior high. We were in the talent show. We were called Armageddon.
Terrible.
And we did a cover of For Whom the Bell Tolls,
right,
and Welcome Home Sanitarium at the talent show.
Wow.
Got in trouble because at the end of the talent show we had people mosh. We had kids mosh, and they moshed onto the stage, and the authorities did not like that at all.
Right.
Got a little talking to. And then we had, this is how school was different in the 80s. We had a principal who was retiring, and she asked us to play at her retirement. So they had like a retirement event in the auditorium of the junior high, and so we played Metallica's Fade to Black, which is a song about suicide.
Uplifting.
Yeah, very uplifting
send off.
Like, who would ever let this happen now?
Right.
It seems like people are more in control of what the kids are doing now. But yeah, so I wanted to be cool. I wanted to play guitar. I wanted to be a heavy metal guy. I never took guitar lessons. I just fooled around with it. But,
right.
Yeah. And then through college, discovering the indie bands, the college scene, Pavement, Pixies, all those guys, the Smiths. You start opening up into different things. You can be more vulnerable.
It's so interesting. I didn't realize. I mean, I realized it, but I didn't realize it to the extent. Now, what got us into music? Like for example, my dad was really into music, and he introduced me to classic rock. My mom's parents were really into big band, so Glenn Miller Orchestra. They used to play all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then my dad's parents just used to listen to kind of like soft, easy listening stuff. But there was always music around growing up, and one of my favorite things as a kid was I would get a half an hour each night to be able to lay in the living room with the headphones and play. I could play one side of an album. Yeah. And my first records, and I don't think I bought them, maybe I got them as gifts, but I had Kiss Alive 2, I had Aerosmith Toys in the Attics, and Aerosmith Rocks. Like, those are the three albums that I just listened to, and I would listen to like a side a night. Yeah. But advanced on, and I went through different phases with classic rock. I got really into the Doors and Zeppelin, but really the Doors. I was huge into the Doors early. But the skateboarding thing was the same for me too. And that was like, for me, I think that was a junior high thing. Got into skateboarding, and pretty much same bands. Suicidal Tendencies was like the first. I was a big Dead Kennedys fan. Like and I loved them because I loved the politics and the more intellectual piece of it. But Suicidal Tendencies, Dead Kennedys, Circle Jerks, Black Flag, like
Minor Threat.
Well, now I separate those two because I was like into those kind of punk bands. But when a friend of mine introduced me to Minor Threat, that's when everything changed.
Then you got
me.
like, is that like New York?
No, Minor Threat was DC, but then I got into Straight Edge, and that's what led me into like New York hardcore bands and Straight Edge.
East versus West.
There was a little bit of that, but it was like you had those like Suicidal, Dead Kennedy. They were all West Coast bands. They were punk rock bands, right?
And then
Minor. You had Bad Brains, Minor Threat.
Yeah.
But that kind of launched hardcore, right?
Yeah, right.
Of which New York was a big spot for hardcore. Yeah. But that's what really like sucked me and my friends in was hardcore and straight edge. And so I didn't get into Metallica as early as you, but still like the heaviness of like the bands that I listened to, the New York bands that, whether it was Agnostic Front or the Cro-Mags or Sick of It All or whatever, there was that guitar heaviness with the breakdowns, right?
Yeah.
It was that combined with sort of either an anti-authoritarian or in a lot of cases a very positive message that I just like, that sucked me in.
Yeah, what hits you if you're a teenager, it hits you at the perfect time.
Yes.
When you're naturally rebelling against everything and everyone, and then here comes the music and the power behind it, right? The vocals and the music to give voice to what you're rebelling, in your own small way. But these guys seem to like be taking on the world, so it's like a heroic almost.
And that's the way that I felt about it.
Which is why it's so disappointing when they sell out.
Yes, but I will say though, there's still a lot of bands that I followed from back in the day that are still doing it and doing it.
For sure. I was just making a joke about Metallica.
Well, but even still, okay, so they became the big, huge, gigantic thing. I'd still rather, if you were to line up all the big, huge, gigantic things, I'd definitely go see Metallica, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I agree. I think their new album is, they're newer. It's a couple of years old now, but I thought it was a great return to form. Hardwired to Self-Destruct.
I don't even know if I've listened to it. My first Metallica album was Injustice for All, or Injustice 4.
Metallica album. The best Metallica album.
That was that one for me. I was just like, oh.
Yeah, that's the one I think that really hit us. Because Master of Puppets had already been out by the time we got into them.
Right.
So Justice was like the first new Metallica album for us.
Yes.
Right. So it hit us like right when, we're on the cusp of this thing that's happening. And it was, that album, they took their sound to its natural apex. Right? Like this is as far as you can take this. I
don't know if Jason Newsted would agree.
Where is Jason Newsted in that album?
Yeah, you can't hear him.
We're still waiting for the Newsted
there's no
cut.
bass.
What do they call it? The Jason remix? Justice for Jason. That's what it's called.
Yeah, where's the bass?
Yeah, and when you actually hear the bass tracks, they're fantastic.
I'm sure they are.
Yeah.
But I didn't carry that because as a guitar player, I was just like...
I never noticed. I didn't notice for years. Yeah, I didn't notice for years.
Me neither.
I just thought that was the way it's supposed to sound.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of bands who actually followed that sound and wanted that sound. That Fleming Rasmussen, who was the producer, they wanted that dry, no bass sound. It was actually a sound for a while. So if you listen to a lot of bands in the early 90s, they have that sound.
Well, it was the guitars. The thing with the guitars at that time was it had scooped mids. So they took the mid. It was they put high gain, high bass, high treble, scooped mids. And then you had the attack on the kick drum that was like really high.
Yeah, it sounds like little bips.
Yeah, which Vinnie Paul took to the next level.
So Justice for All was like the album. But in that album, Metallica took their sound, I think, to its natural end. They couldn't go any further than that. You can't go any further than every song is 10 minutes. Every song's got 3 guitar solos. Every song is, going through all these time changes and they'll say it today, trying to play those in concert, it's just exhausting. So I could see why after And Justice for All, they would make the Black Album.
Right.
And cut everything way back and like get back to basics.
Which is now in our repertoire.
Our repertoire. But
we're at the, hey, that sounds like that song stage, right?
That's 3. Yeah.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, we've been playing music together for probably off and on for 20 some
Yeah.
years
Yeah.
with John.
Yeah, with John Sheffield.
And we have recently regrouped for our I think our ultimate and long run
I
here.
think so too. I'm actually trying to learn the songs this time, which is different than other times when I'm really just trying to, I don't know what I was trying to do.
I don't
When
either.
I look back on it, I'm like, how did we even get through that?
Right.
I wasn't even playing the right notes.
Right. Some people saw us and they were like, that was entertaining, you know? I mean, but now, exactly. Now we are as grown men
Yes.
saying, gonna learn how to play this song properly. And, you know, it's a little more difficult than
Yeah. Like there's actually some notes in here that I had not previously known.
it's literally taken me a month to get lit up, timed out right. Like, actually, I'm like, okay, I do feel that tonight I will play it correctly.
Yeah, this afternoon I was practicing Inner Sandman on the bass, and they're looking at the tab, and I was like, I did not know that was the sound that the bass was making. Were these notes? That's interesting.
I haven't studied that one yet. I just started it, so that's going to be rusty. And when the guitar solo comes, it's going to be a fucking disaster. It's going to be a wank fest. But I give it, like through this summer, I feel like, at some point in time, we're going to have to say, now we're really just talking to each other here.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Fuck the audience.
No.
Right? We're going to have to limit the set list and just say, we got to get good at these songs. Because I've got a stack of about another 40 songs that could like plow into this.
Yeah,
and then we could suck at all of them.
We should call. We should say, okay, this.
Maybe this one doesn't feel that good anymore.
This was fine, but let's.
Yeah.
There's more interesting things to play.
All right.
So yeah, I think circling back, way back.
Yeah.
I think being surrounded by music at a young age definitely is a contributor to enjoying music.
Yeah. It's just so
throughout your life.
Great. It's just so great if you're into it, right? To be able to listen to it, check it out, but then to play it. There's something about,
again, it's a puzzle that you're figuring out, and you're like, wow, look at how these pieces fit together. And what always amazes me is about how simple the songs are, but it's every time it amazes me. Every time I learn a song, I'm like, really, this is the song? Like, it's these 4 chords,
right?
That's it. That's the whole song.
But it's the execution, right? And the feeling.
It's the feeling. It's the production. It's everything that was put into
tone.
it. That's where it happens. Like writing, it's in the editing. Like film, it's in the editing. It's in the final putting it together that really makes it happen. And that's amazing about music. But yeah, I remember as a kid, my dad had some classical albums, and I remember standing there like in a white t-shirt and probably my undies in the living room when nobody was home, pretending I was conducting, because I was so into it. And what's great about music too is about how much there is to discover. For example, there's because my dad was into doo-wop and had dabbled in like I said, Chicago Transit Authority and the Doors, but there was and then so we go from that to the 80s. So like everything in between I had missed when I was a kid. And of course you don't want to listen to it when you're a kid because that's old. But as you get older, you can go back to music of the 60s, 70s and be like, wow, there's a lot of good stuff here. And it's like you're discovering it anew. It's for you. For you, it's new. And I love going back to that stuff and seeing the influence on later bands, or even listening to something and being like, wow, these guys were so ahead of their time. This sounds like today, or this, the bands of today are copying this. Nothing new under the sun kind of thing. But again, it's all in the execution. It's all in the unique spin you're going to put on it.
It's true. I discovered that recently, and I mean, literally, it was just one afternoon that I dabbled into it. But I always read people talking about Johnny Thunders, the guitar player Johnny Thunders from the New York Dolls.
Oh, the New York Dolls.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I never really listened to him, and all the punk guys look to Johnny Thunders was like the punk Keith Richards, right?
Okay.
Kind of fucking wasted out heroin dude, sloppy kind of player. And so I was like, well, let me just check this guy out. And then I started listening to this. I listened one day to like a bunch of this stuff. And I was like, oh, now I get it. Because he was super rooted in like the late 50s, early 60s, like early like Chuck Berry style of rock and roll. But he was playing it a lot faster in a much more punky kind of way than Keith Richards. And just one day I was like, oh, you can hear the old.
Yeah.
and you can hear how everybody after him interpreted that into something else. And that's the cool thing about music, is when you hear how the styles are passed on into the point where you're like, okay, it doesn't sound like, what you could hear today maybe doesn't sound like, and I'll just again use Chuck Berry as an example, but it all goes back to that, there's this history.
It's awesome when you can find those connections between, and the through lines of how it's evolved into today's music, or the music that more recent music that you've been listening to. Yeah, I love that piece of it. And how did you and I, it's interesting to think about how because we have bands that we liked in common, and it's interesting because there are bands that I think of like, oh, nobody knows who these guys are. Right? But then you find, especially with the internet now, of course, that's what's amazing about the internet, is you find like-minded. Well, it's a benefit and a detriment of the internet.
Right.
But there were bands that like God Lives Underwater and Orange 9mm, right? Like somehow they'd come up in conversation. You'd be like, oh, Orange 9mm. And I'd be like, what? How does Chris even know Orange 9mm exists?
Well, they were okay. So you had the New York hardcore scene, and then you kind of had like this post-hardcore, and like the post-hardcore New York bands were Helmet, Quicksand,
amazing,
Orange 9mm. Oh, yeah, I like Slip. I like Slip.
I know you do.
Yeah, Slip.
We had that conversation 20 years ago.
Let's have it again.
Yeah.
But those bands, so Orange 9, they were all guys that were in previous bands. So the singer of Orange 9mm was this guy named Chaka. Chaka was in this band called Absolution, that was a big New York hardcore band, who actually, the first singer was this guy named Gingy, who actually now runs a boxing gym down in Miami.
Wow.
These guys, they're still around, and I keep kind of either bumping into them or they have presences on social media. But, to answer your question, Orange 9 was just one of the post-hardcore bands that was guys who were in other hardcore bands, and then they were kind of all moving on. But I feel like Helmet was the one that, like...
They broke through.
Yeah, they broke through, and they said, this is the way that it's going to be.
They broke through, and they were on MTV, and
Yeah.
So they got through. But it's interesting how we connected it back then on different musical genres, like DJ Shadow.
I knew you were going there. I was so glad you went there.
Right? You introduced me to DJ Shadow.
I did?
You did. I had never heard of DJ Shadow, and you either gave me the CD, or I don't know how it worked back then. You must have given me the CD. Had to have. And you said, you got to listen to this. And I listened to it at least once a month today.
Now, you said earlier, you were talking about like how music can be a soundtrack.
Yeah.
That's a soundtrack album. That's an album that, like, I've been in countless cities around this country or around the world with that in my that in the headphones. Don't know anybody, anything, anywhere I'm going, and I got that music on, and I am fucking, like, I'm in the zone, just enjoying life, checking stuff out. That's a soundtrack.
Yeah. Because every note,
every beat,
every sample,
everything, and it's like so simple and beautiful, and it's got such strong emotional quality.
Yeah. What I've enjoyed recently is going back and finding the samples that he used and listening to them in their original context.
No way.
And then you really start to realize,
Jeffrey, you're next level.
What a genius this guy is in putting them together. You're like, this came from that? What?
Yeah, I'm almost like, all right, let's stop talking. Let's go put it on.
Let's put it on. So DJ Shadow, I remember us talking about Linkin Park. What's the first song on their breakout album? With the sun goes down is the lyric. As sun goes down. I remember we were in the office and you were saying, man, the end of that song is just one of the best things ever. And I was like, man, you're so right.
Well, because it's also got that beautiful vocal.
There's a harmony that goes on there. I still remember that to this day.
Oh, wow.
So they were like,
well, because there was a time when you and John were in the same office together.
Yeah, me, John, and Gregory Bruce. Yeah, we shared an office. 3 guys in that was the Zimmerman way.
Bose Nouveau.
Yeah, Bose Nouveau. That's right. Check him out on
Instagram. Yeah, that's right.
So we shared an office, and we would listen to whatever anybody had. So we'd listen to Dream Theater. We'd listen to Linkin Park, Mr. Bungle. I mean, It was eclectic.
Yes.
It was an eclectic mix in there. So you had John, who loved new metal, classic rock and new metal both. Gregory Bruce was more into jazz.
Super.
And then I was into heavy metal, progressive rock.
Yes.
So it was like there was music all day long. All day long. It was all we did.
I remember. It's funny. One of the things that I remember about Jordan, because Jordan, you know, he didn't always have like the coolest perspective on certain things. Like if you ask, like I think he liked Barry Manilow a lot. Like Jordan was way into Barry Manilow.
Sure.
But I remember I had a video, a VHS of my college band. We did a TV show, and we had this song. We called it the Trilogy, and it had 3 sections to it. And there was one section where the chord progression, and I didn't even know at the time, does have a House of the Rising Sun kind of feel to it, right? And so we were in your office, and I was showing you guys this, and Jordan came in. And he's watching, and I'm thinking like he's not gonna. He's gonna be right? Like, he's gonna. What the hell? Right?
What are you guys goofing off?
Yeah. Yeah. But he was like during that part, he starts singing, "There is a house in New Orleans," you know, and he starts like belting out the song. And I remember thinking like, well, that was actually pretty fucking cool. I didn't even hear that, and he hit it, and he actually fucking nailed it.
Yeah. He's secretly like a music. It was aficionado.
Interesting, but you're right. We did have a lot of conversations, and even now that we've been getting back together, I mean, most of the time we finish playing and then we're here.
Yeah, we're here just jawing.
Yes, talking about music.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
But this time around has been more fulfilling. Even though I enjoyed the previous times around as a band, it's been more fulfilling to kind of really get in there and dig in and figure out the song and try to be more of a musician.
Yes.
Versus, I'm just going there to.
Well, I want to, like, you know, I know you feel the same way. Like, I want to get to the point where we can play these and perform these songs for people.
Yeah.
And they go, wow.
Yeah, that was good.
That was good. You know, I don't know that we're going to blow anybody away, but I mean, as long as people walk away going, that was way better than what I would have expected, and I enjoyed that, then, you know, that's a good start.
And like we talked about before, the point is just doing it. Just doing something.
Mm-hmm.
Just do it.
That's right.
Nike.
Perfect end to an advertising phenomenal, you know, brand tagline. Just do it.
When Nike flipped the script.
That's right.
Yeah, and
Jeff.
put the focus on the consumer and not the product. That changed everything.
Is that really what it was, right?
That's the moment when brands realized that the story was about the consumer, right? The product is the enabler. The consumer is the hero of their story. The product is the enabler of the action that they want to take. Right? So Nike didn't come out and say, this is the best shoe ever. They might have said that in sub-marketing.
Right.
But their main message was about you. Just do it. Same thing that Apple did. Think different. It's not about them. It's about you. Flip the script.
I did not realize that in either instance. That's a beautiful lesson right here.
See, I save it to the end. Start off with all the BS, and then at the end deliver the real lesson.
Pow!
Daniel-san.
Oh, thank you, Jefferson. Most appreciative. But seriously, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
I've enjoyed
it. Was a pleasant
man.
surprise to be invited, and I've enjoyed it. Thank you, Chris.
Me too, man. All right.
Thank you.
Cheers. To some rock and roll later, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right,
Let's get to it.
All right, man.
All right.